Andrew McCart, iFLTV. You already know I'm always, every single time I speak to Mr. Dan Rafael, I'm excited because you speak your truth. And I think a lot of people appreciate that, Dan. Now, a massive weekend for boxing this weekend. Pacquiao's return, undisputed heavyweight championship over here in the UK. Now, I want to start on undisputed, if you don't mind. I know you were in Vegas for the Pacquiao return and Tim Tszyu and Fundura and all that. But I want to talk about the undisputed fight because, wow, what can we say about Oleksandr Usyk that hasn't been said?
I mean, not much. I mean, it sort of reinforces what we've sort of expected, what we've known.
Mm.
I picked him by a knockout. The result didn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form. He's a tremendous fighter, and he hasn't yet shown his age at 38. I think going into the match with Daniel, the combination of the way that Daniel has boxed in his previous three fights with the knockout wins against Joshua and Hrgovic and Gerald Miller, combined with the fact that Usyk had those two very hard fights with Fury and is now 38, people sort of thought, well, maybe they've leveled the playing field just a little bit. And when you close the gap at the elite level, sometimes it can make a huge difference. It didn't matter because Daniel Dubois was the same old, good puncher, obviously, but just did not have the defense or the game plan or the ability to do any real damage because it's hard to land clean punches against Oleksandr Usyk. It's a lot easier to do that against the fighters I just mentioned because not only does Usyk have all the skills that you would want from a heavyweight for any fighter for that matter, his defense is outstanding. And even if he gets touched, he usually takes a good shot. He takes them well. He doesn't get dropped or hurt really badly or anything like that. So it all added up to another brilliant performance for Usyk, who's now undisputed once again. And I know he'll get a lot of applause, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, and now he's a two-time undisputed heavyweight champion, and that's cool and everything." But let's all remember, he should be a one-time undisputed heavyweight champion because he never should have been stripped of the belt that cost him that status in the first place. That they essentially gifted to Daniel Dubois, who had won the interim belt against Hrgovic, and then because of the business deal with the rematch with Fury, Usyk was forced to vacate, and therefore Dubois was elevated. Not Daniel's fault, but it's just the nonsense of the sanctioning body. So yeah, he's two-time undisputed champion, but in my mind, he's been the champ, period, since his first victory against Tyson Fury. So it's a great achievement. And for the purpose of Daniel Dubois, he's only 27. You hope he can come back and make some good fights. And I would say when you go back to the gym, work on defense, work on keeping your hand up.
Mm. When you mentioned Alexander Usyk's age there being 38, now a lot of what I saw during fight week from major outlets like TalkSport and even IFLTV, we were all mentioning the fact, and even yourself said that father time waits for no man. But we haven't seen that decline in Alexander Usyk yet. However, he has wiped out the heavyweight division essentially. For you, Dan, I know you're not in the Usyk camp, but for you as a sports writer and as a boxing fan, what would you like Alexander to do next? I mean, there's nothing left to prove, is there?
Well, listen, if you're going to continue to box, and Alexander Usyk made it very clear in his post-fight news conference that as opposed to previous fights that he's had where he said he might think about retiring or he might not want to do it anymore, he was very crystal clear that he said, well, I can't tell you who I'm going to fight next. I'm going to fight again. Okay, so once you've determined that the heavyweight champion is going to continue with his career, now you see who's out there and who's available and who makes a lot of sense to do. Now, one thing people have to understand is that not every fight is going to be a 90,000 seat stadium fight. Okay, when Mike Tyson and Larry Holmes and other great fighters in the heavyweight division were making fights during the middle of like long title reigns, you can look at Klitschko, you can look at Evander Holyfield, you can look at a variety of guys. They all had fights that were not those types of mega events where they had them in normal arenas and they went about their business of defending titles. That's why you have like in the more modern times, like Vladimir Klitschko defended the title 18 times in his second reign. There was a lot of big stadium mega fights, fair enough, but there were some that were in smaller places that weren't on that level. And if Usyk can accept that, there's plenty of good fights out there. It's not as though there's another massive British stadium fight, but I would like to see him fight Joseph Parker. He is the mandatory challenger in the WBO. It is the fight that is due. Joseph stepped aside. Joseph is a former world champion. Joseph is well known to the boxing public, whether it's in the United States or in Britain. He's known even more so in Britain, obviously. He deserves the opportunity. So that's the fight that should happen. And frankly, if Alexander Usyk wants to maintain the undisputed status and still hold on to the WBO belt, That's the fight that has to happen because the WBO has made that very clear. If he doesn't, I assume they will strip him and live up to the resolution that they have issued. So the WBO, to my way of looking at it, and knowing Gustavo Oliveira, who is the new president, they're going to follow their rules, and they would like that mandatory to be fulfilled. And I don't. It's Oleksandr Usyk doesn't duck fighters, so why wouldn't you be able to make that fight? That's a good fight. It's not. It's not like some knockover kind of fight. I mean, of course, he'll be the favorite, but I also look at it like this. I mean, he's now had rematch after rematch after rematch. He's fought Dubois twice. He's fought Fury twice. He's fought Joshua twice. Let's find something new, okay? I don't want to hear about a third Tyson Fury fight right now. If you tell me you want to, fight that down the road, so be it. But it's not a mandatory. Fury has been quasi in retirement. He's lost 2 fights in a row. So let's bring on some kind of fresh matchup. So that's the fight I would like to see. And if he doesn't want to fight that fight, you could still give another guy an opportunity, like a Najib Kabiel, for example, who's your WBC interim champion, who deserves the shot. There are other fighters in the heavyweight division. They may not have the name recognition of a Tyson Fury or an Anthony Joshua or a public behind them like a Daniel Dubois, but they're good fighters who deserve a chance to fight for the heavyweight championship.
Dan, you've been in the sport long enough. Sometimes good fighters deserve to fight for the title compared to a fighter that puts bums on seats and makes that coin, as we say. Boxing's
Well,
a big old sport.
Usyk's going to put bums in seats now. He can do that, and again, it's not like he's just randomly picking a guy. These are fighters that through the sanctioning bodies have a certain that there's obligations to give them the title shot. Now, I'm not a big fan or proponent of interim titles, but if they're going to use them, at least when they get to the position, order the fights between the interim guy and the champion. So again, to me, it's very simple. Joe Parker should be the next challenger. End of story.
I probably agree with you, but we saw that Tyson Fury was at Wembley on Saturday, but he left early, done the sort of fan meet and greet. Then he posted a video on Instagram, him running the streets at close to 1 a.m. in the morning, saying that Oleksandr Usyk knows I'm the only man that can beat him, and he lost the first 2 fights against him. What do you make of all that? You know Tyson Fury as well as I do. Tyson Fury is the guy that, I mean, he does what he wants, says what
Listen,
he
Andrew,
wants.
all I know is it's 2-0 Oleksandr Usyk, and I got no problem with either decision. I'm not, like I said, I'm not opposed to a third fight, okay? I'm opposed to a third fight next because it's time to get some fresh blood in the ring for the heavyweight title. It's time to get somebody that's not coming off back-to-back losses, who's retired 15 times. It's time to get a guy in there that deserves the shot besides all the same guys he's been fighting. So, again, if Fury wants to come out of retirement, that's cool. I'm happy to have Tyson Fury back in the mix. But wait your turn, dude. You already had 2 in a row, and you didn't win either one of them, even if they were close.
How good a chance do you give Joseph Parker? I mean, he was on a great run of form. Those 5 fights, I think, in a calendar year against Zhang and who else did he fight? He fought Wild. No. Who else did he? Wilder? Yeah, he fought Wilder. He fought 5 fights back to back in the calendar year. I think I can't remember who every single opponent was, but how well a chance or how good a chance do you give Joseph Parker going into somebody against somebody like Alexander Usyk?
Well, he would be the underdog, obviously. And frankly, everybody in the heavyweight division right now is the underdog to Oleksandr Usyk. And that includes, a third fight with Fury. That would include a third fight with Joshua. That would include Kabiel. It would include Parker. Pick a heavyweight. I don't care who you pick. He's going to be the underdog. But this isn't about whether he's the underdog or not. It's about who's done the job, who's clawed their way to the top to deserve and to win the fights you have to win. And in my book, if you knock out Martin McCall, even if there was some extenuating circumstances on the timing of the fight, and you also had wins back to back against Deontay Wilder and Zhang, those are 3 solid wins in a row. Not to mention, as you mentioned, he had 3 or 4 other victories since the Joe Joyce loss, and that goes all the way back to 2022. So there's not a heavyweight in the division on a better run who's been more active and scored name wins than Joseph Parker. I'll say it for the 500th time. He should be the next opponent for Usyk. And Usyk strikes me as the kind of fighter who's not looking to duck guys. Make a fair business deal with him, and he'll be in the ring, and he'll show up.
One more on this, Dan. I've seen talking heads, ex-world champions, Carl Frampton, the likes, and Lennox Lewis, and everybody talk about Oleksandr Usyk, and they've all said he's a generational great. And they've all said something along the lines of he'll compete or he will win world titles in any era, the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, the 90s. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that Oleksandr Usyk, if you were to pick him up and drop him in any era from the 60s onwards, would he compete? Would he win titles in them eras?
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. He's the traditional sized heavyweight. Now we have a lot of guys that are the Fury size, big 6'7", 6'6",
Mm.
250
Yeah.
or 60 pounds. But he's the classical sized heavyweight in terms of his height, in terms of his weight. But more importantly than all that, he has all of the skills offensively and defensively, the amateur background that builds your foundation. He has, in my opinion, underrated power, even though he's not. I mean, Daniel Dubois might disagree. I've never viewed him as a one-shot knockout guy, but he can definitely hurt you. And he scored some nice knockouts. And he certainly scored a lot of knockouts when he was in the cruiserweight division. So yeah, I would absolutely say the combination of his offense, his defense, his amateur pedigree, and his experience level and his perfect size for the division, all the things that you would go into like divvying up what metrics here and there, and just his smarts. I mean, he's a very intelligent fighter. So I have zero doubt that if you drop him in any of those years, whether it's the all-time great era of the 70s, the next greatest heavyweight era of the 90s, or any of the years, that he would thrive. And he's clearly, I've said for a long time that the current era that we're in, which is when I say that it's Usyk, it's Fury, it's Wilder, it's Joshua, that those are the guys that sort of lead the way. But there's others in there also, a Parker, a Zhang, a Joe Joyce, you name it. This is the third greatest era in heavyweight boxing history to me, because you have the 1970s, obviously led by Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman, and lots of other guys, whether you want to talk about some of the guys that they faced, Kenny Norton or Jerry Quarry. I mean, there's a lot of great fighters from the 70s. That's the greatest era in heavyweight boxing. And then you go in the 90s, and you're talking about Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, the return of George Foreman after a very long layoff, Riddick Bowe, Tommy Morrison, Razor Ruddock. I mean, plenty of good heavyweights in that era, and they all eventually, most of them mixed with each other. And this one is after that. So he's dominated this era. He's beaten all the guys he's supposed to beat. So yeah, I have no doubt that he would be a quality heavyweight, winning titles and being in the biggest fights in any era you want to put him. And I wouldn't even say it just to the 1960s. You put him, since they put padded gloves on men's hands. I mean, either way.
Now, you were in Vegas for the return of Manny Pacquiao. Um, I watched snippets of the fight. I didn't really get to see the whole fight because, like I say, I'm in Spain right now. But you were there. I saw a lot of people saying the disappointment in Barrios, and the way Barrios performed and how Manny Pacquiao looked good. You were
Yeah.
there, Dan. What was your what was your take on the whole sort of fight in
I thought
itself?
I thought that Manny looked way better than any of us had the right to expect at 46, coming
Mhm.
off a long layoff. Uh, Now, it certainly wasn't the Pacquiao of the prime, but if you didn't know that the man that got into the boxing ring hadn't fought for 4 years and was 46 years old, you would never, in your wildest dreams, think that was true. He fought a good fight. He fought an intelligent fight. He landed better punches, in my opinion. Mario Barrios is a good guy and a hard worker, and I have a lot of respect for him. And I have ample respect for Bob Santos, who's a tremendous trainer that works with him and their whole team. But in my opinion, he didn't win the fight. I thought he got a gift. I thought it was a bad job from the judges. I'm at a loss for how anybody. It's one thing if you want to tell me at a 114, 114, I might be able to sort of figure that out. But the one judge, Max DeLuca, that had it 115 to 113, and Max is a good judge. I'm not ragging on the judge. I'm just saying I just don't see that now. You know, it is what it is. But I thought that Manny Pacquiao, with his movement, with the combination punching, as opposed to Barrios, that was really sort of one at a time. He did have a nice jab in the fight, but he never did any real damage with it, in my opinion. Neither one of them had any like big, big. There was no knockdowns or almost knockdowns. But I felt like when they did have some of the exchanges, and there was a handful during the fight, I thought Manny Pacquiao absolutely won the exchanges. And I heard people speaking at the post-fight press conference. They were saying, "Well, he stole the round at the end of the round." Well, it's not stealing the round. What it is it's putting in the work and landing the shots in an otherwise close round. Where at the end, if you're landing a nice flurry or you get into an exchange and you clearly win the exchange, and not a lot has happened, in the previous like 2.5 minutes, it's not stealing the round. It's winning the round. It's close, but you win the round. So I thought that Manny Pacquiao won this fight. You want to tell me you scored it 7-5, 8-4, 9-3? I get that. I don't get a draw, and I don't get Barrios winning, and I don't agree that Barrios, on the official scorecards, the way that Barrios achieved the draw, because he was behind after the eighth round on all three cards, is that he won on all three scorecards the final 3 rounds of the fight. And I don't agree with that. But again, I'm not an official judge, and it is what it is. But it was very disappointing to see Pacquiao put in such a good performance at that age and that length of a layoff against an opponent that really, in my opinion, didn't really come to fight and not get rewarded for his efforts. And obviously the crowd was for Manny. So when they announced the judges' scorecards, the entire, and I've covered, countless fights in the MGM Grand Garden Arena. I've never heard it going from like a fever pitch of expectation where one guy was the winner. Because frankly, pretty much everybody, I'm not talking about the fans because they were mostly there for Pacquiao, but all the people that were there on press row, most people had Manny Pacquiao winning. The prevailing score was 8-4, it seemed to me. I found a smattering of draws. I couldn't really find anybody on press row that actually scored it for Barrios. So when they announced the scores, like sometimes you're in an arena and it's like all of a sudden it's pretty quiet, and then some big moment happens and the whole place goes crazy, and it's like they blow the roof off the place. Mm-hmm. This was the exact opposite. You had people at like a fever pitch expecting a Pacquiao victory, and all of a sudden they call it a draw, and it was like the deflation in the crowd was just it was amazing. Like it went from a fever pitch to like you could hear a pin drop.
That begs the question, and what next for Manny? Because I was listening to some of the post-fight interviews fight week from some outlets, and there was loads of talk of Mayweather rematch if Pacquiao was to win, and even Pacquiao himself said post-fight that they'll have discussions in the coming week whether that Mayweather rematch happens. Now, for you, Dan, what next for Manny Pacquiao? Is it the Floyd Mayweather rematch? Is it finally going to retirement?
God, no. Listen, the Mayweather shit's that's all from the Pacquiao side. They're trolling for that fight. I've never heard one thing that's reputable from anybody even fringely associated with Floyd that's something that he's interested in doing or was going to do. Floyd is retired until he says otherwise. That is the case. And on top of that, I have zero personal interest in that rematch. The first fight sucked. The build up to the fight was a pain in the ass. Getting the contract done was an arduous and thankless task to cover that shit for 5 years. The fight itself was horrible. The fight week, I've said many times, was the worst fight week I ever covered in the hundreds of fight weeks I have covered in the thousands of fights I have seen. Absolute miserable. And why would anybody want to see them? The fight sucked so bad 10 years ago. Why would anybody want to pay to see it a second time? So yeah, let Pacquiao talk about that. That's fine. But if you want to get down to what's actual facts and what's real, what Manny Pacquiao said at the press conference, what I sort of just said was Manny said that Floyd is retired. If he decides to come out of retirement, I'd like to fight him again. That's fair. I understand it from his perspective because he didn't get the win, and he certainly would like to right that wrong, and certainly could probably make a better person he made for the Barrios fight. But he did make very clear the Pac-Man is back. He's going to fight again. He didn't lose. Mm-hmm. People have to remember that he got a draw. So he still did a lot better than a lot of people expected because he was the underdog. I know he didn't get the title. He would have liked to do that. He would have become the oldest welterweight world champion, breaking his own record. He would have become the second oldest fighter in boxing history to win a major world title. So I understand why the disappointment was there. He said he would like to fight Barrios in a rematch.
That was my next question. That was going to be my next question. Rematch?
If they made it, I get it. But, it wasn't such a good fight that you're dying to see it. I'm kind of ambivalent about it. If they decide they want to do a rematch, that's cool. I'll cover it. I'll go cover it. I'll watch it, whatever. If not, there's other fighters that Manny could look to try to make a matchup with. Who that will be, I can't tell you. There's, Gerant Ennis has left the division. He wasn't going to tangle with a guy like that. I don't see him fighting a Brian Norman, who's got a fight scheduled. They did try to make a Conor Benn fight against Manny back last year. If there are issues, and for whatever reason the Eubank fight doesn't happen, there's been a lot of discussion about some issues there. Like, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But right now, they'll play it by ear. But I do suspect, based on the way that Manny and the team were talking in the post-fight, that we'll see him back in action in the fourth quarter of this year, I would think. Sometime probably November, December. And if he's going to continue working with PBC, it makes a lot of sense because PBC does not have a lot of pay-per-view level guys that they can have, on top of a big show, because a lot of the fighters that they work with have other things going on. Canelo left, and he's now with Turkey. Even though David Benavidez, I guess, is still with them in some degree, his next fight's going to take place in Riyadh, so he's not going to fight on a PBC card, at least for the rest of this year anyway. Tank Davis, no one knows what's up with him. He's got legal issues. They can't get him in the ring. He's a guy certainly they can headline a pay-per-view, but his schedule is very up in the air, let's say, to be kind. They had a pay-per-view fight they were looking to do in the end of the year, which would have been Caleb Plant against Charlo, but then Caleb Plant went out and lost his fight. So that fight's out of the picture. My point here is this. If PBC is looking to do main event level fights, Manny Pacquiao, at least at the moment, based on that performance and his popularity, is certainly a guy that can headline a pay-per-view card. So I expect he'll be back at the end of the year. And against who, I can't tell you that, but maybe it's a Barrios rematch and maybe it's something else. But I can tell you one thing. I'm pretty confident it's not going to be Floyd Mayweather rematch. Thank God.
That's why I love speaking to you, Dan. I honestly love you. Like I said to you beforehand, people love the way you speak, especially here in the UK. You don't mix your words, and I think that's very, especially in a day and age where a lot of people are scared to speak their mind. You
Why
very
would you
much
be
don't.
scared to speak your mind? I said before the fight, when people asked me about the prospect of Mayweather, when it was being discussed as if Manny wins, maybe they'll try to make the rematch. I said I'd fucking rather set myself on fire than watch that fucking fight again.
Well, listen, I probably believe that as well, Dan. To be fair, listen, the undercard. When I spoke to you beforehand as well, when I spoke about the undercard, I was looking forward to again. I'm going to go home tomorrow night and watch the undercard. Now we had guys like I saw Sebastian Fundora, Tim Tszyu highlights. That looked good. I saw the Brandon Figueroa, Isaac Cruz. The card within itself, though, Dan, how much of a fun card was it to watch?
Oh, I really enjoyed the card. I thought top to
Mm.
bottom this was a really good show. I thought it was a good card on paper. My main thought about that was if you remember last year when Fundora and Tim Tszyu had their first fight. Granted, it was made on only about 10 days' notice when Keith Thurman had the injury and had to withdraw from the fight against Tszyu. But Fundora and Tszyu, the first fight, headlined the pay-per-view. This time it was the co-feature. So I felt like there was value based on the PBC product and the way that they handled their events. Uh, and that turned out to be a very solid fight, even if it was somewhat one-sided.
Mm.
It was a good card top to bottom. Even the fights, like the pay-per-view was 4 bouts, but they also on Prime Video had 3 fights that were for free as part of their streaming preliminary fights. Even those fights were interesting. Yeah, and I'll go run down in order. You had in the main card, the main fight on that part of the card, you had Gary Russell,
Yeah.
who was coming back after a 3.5 year layoff, and from his loss of the featherweight title, moved up to, well, technically it was a lightweight fight, but he only weighed 131 pounds. His opponent was a lightweight. Gary was just a little smidge over the junior lightweight limit. But I thought for a guy out of the ring 3.5 years, fighting, was not a well-known opponent, but a guy that seemed pretty durable and pretty tough and showed a lot of heart against Hugo Castaneda. I thought Gary looked really good. He had a couple of knockdowns early on. I thought he was going to finish him right there. And it's funny, I was on the airplane going to Vegas and coming home from Vegas because we both fly from Vegas to Washington, D.C. So I was on the flight with Gary and with his brother and with their team. And when we were in the airport and got on the plane to go home, I was joking around with him. I said, I thought you had him out of there in like the second round. He goes, yeah, I thought maybe, but I need some rounds. So he ended up stopping him like in the 10th round, like just a little bit before the end of the fight. But, if Gary decides he wants to continue, he can definitely make some noise in my mind. And that was just one of those prelim fights. You also had Mark Magsayo, who was that's the guy that beat Russell to win the featherweight bout. Now he's fighting at junior lightweight. He was in a very exciting fight, but very one-sided against Jorge Mata. That was the opening fight on the prelims. You had Alan David Picasso, who was lined up to fight Naoya Inoue in Saudi Arabia in December, but he had to win this fight that he had against Kameda, one of the Japanese cousins of the fighting Kamedas. And Inoue obviously has to win his fight in September, but he didn't look great, but he won the fight pretty clearly. That was a pretty solid fight. Then you get to the pay-per-view. You mentioned about Figueroa against Joet Gonzalez. Now, okay, that was a WBA eliminator in the featherweight division. And Brandon has been a good fighter for a number of years. He's been a champion in 2 weight classes. But Joet Gonzalez, who had challenged for the title 3 times, I thought he kind of got ripped off in that fight. Kind of another hard luck loss for him. I mean, I don't know what they were watching on that one. I saw, I didn't realize this till after the fight, but Larry Hazard, who does the ringside scoring for PBC as the unofficial judge, he had Joet Gonzalez winning the fight. I agreed with that. It's too bad because Joet deserved a better fate, but it was a pretty good fight for if you're just watching as a fan and don't have any particular rooting interest other than you'd like to see the right guy win. Isaac Cruz, that was an unfortunate situation because his opponent changed the day before the fight because of weight issues for Angel Fierro. Everybody was looking forward to the rematch that they had a great first fight in February, but he took on Omar Salcedo, who was in a fight on the undercard, and he was moved up into this slot on the pay-per-view. And he just could not deal with Cruz. That was probably the weakest of the fights. Cruz is always fun to watch, but Salcedo just resorted to a lot of holding and grabbing because he just couldn't deal with the overwhelming offense from Cruz, who ended up winning a very clear and one-sided 10-round decision. Then you had the Fundora and Tszyu fight where Fundora just put a beating on Tim Tszyu, and And ultimately, Tim retired in the corner after the seventh round. He just had no answers. I mean, he got knocked down early,
Yeah.
and the first fight there was the situation with the bloodshed from the accidental elbow slash forearm that ripped open that cut, and the blood just flowed the entire fight. So he was unnerved by that, and I understand it. Plus, it was made on short notice. He's going from fighting, a 5'10" guy to a 6'6" guy. It's a huge change. He's changing from a right-handed fighter to a
Yeah.
left-handed fighter. So there was a lot of things that you could understand going wrong in the first fight. But for the rematch, Andrew, he had all kinds of time to prepare. Same result, and even easier. He didn't just lose a close split decision. He got his ass kicked. And I mean, it's unfortunate because I'm a big Tim Tszyu fan. He's a true warrior who'll fight anybody. Um, but it just seems like based on that fight, and if you go back to two fights before that, when he got annihilated by Bakram Murtazalev when he challenged for the title of the IBF, his time at the top may be over. I mean, he did come back and win the Joey Spencer fight, but that was kind of a setup kind of fight. He never, was going to be in danger against Joey Spencer. But he's taken a beating now against Murtazalev, and he took a beating against Fundora. And, you hate to say it, hope he can come back, but it feels like his time at the top is over.
Yeah, I probably agree with you, Dan, as well. Now, there was another fight weekend was Bam Rodriguez, but I think both you being busy with the Pacquiao weekend in Vegas and then your flight home and you've been busy with everything else and me being in Spain, I yet haven't watched the fight and yourself, you haven't watched the fight yet. But Bam got the win and he's back out in November on a Riyadh season card. I know we haven't seen the fight, but Dan, just a word on Bam Rodriguez and how good this kid is.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a couple of highlights, and one of my plans on after you and I are done speaking, I'll have a leisurely rest of my Monday. Is I will watch the entirety of the Bam Rodriguez fight. It didn't surprise me that he got the win. Obviously, it didn't surprise me that he got the stoppage. But the main thing is, in the about 10 days, 2 weeks before he got in the ring to fight Cafu in the unification, it came known to him and his team that they had the fight secured for November to have if he was the winner, a 3-belt unification fight against Fernando Martinez. And let me tell you, that is a tremendous matchup because Martinez has been in some superb fights, and Bam is a very exciting fighter. But Bam is 25 years old. He's now a unified champion in a second weight division because he also had unified the titles in the flyweight division with his stoppage against Sonny Edwards. He's won titles at junior bantamweight, went down, won a title, and then unified at flyweight, went back up to junior bantamweight, destroyed Juan Francisco Estrada, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame, to retake the WBC belt that he had given up, win the lineal title, and then he unified against Cafu. I mean, this kid is 25 years old, and he's getting better. He's not, he's in his prime, I guess, right now, and he is putting together, a Hall of Fame caliber career. There's no doubt about it. You go into Saudi Arabia and you beat Fernando Martinez, that's just another tremendous line item on your resume. And, he is a worthy pound for pound top 10 guy right now. He's super fun to watch. He's as humble and nice a guy as you can ever deal with. I've interviewed Bam on a number of occasions, including before this fight. I've met him many times. He's just a great kid. He's got a good team behind him with Robert Garcia and their whole group. He's everything you want to see in a fighter because he's exciting to watch. He's great with the fans. He's great with the press. He fights his ass off. He's not looking to duck or dodge anybody. He'll fight whoever, and he's shown that by the fighters he's faced. I mean, when you remember, when he won his first title against Quadras, he was a late replacement. He was on the undercard. And when the main event fight, Quadras was supposed to, I think it was Srisaket Sarangisai, that was supposed to be the fight. And Sarangisai had to withdraw from the fight. So he moved up, like, in essence, about 2 weight classes and took on Quadras on short notice and won. And never, there was no bitching and moaning. I don't know if I should take the fight. He took the fight, and he's been off to the races ever since. So he's a special talent and an outstanding fighter. And I just love watching him, and he's a class guy.
Definitely, Dan. I agree with you on that one as well. And like when I get home tomorrow night, I'm going to watch the fight itself because nobody was out there in terms of UK media. So I didn't hear nothing about the fight in terms of sort of how big the spectacle was, how big the whole atmosphere was with was it Jerry Jones, the Cowboy Callis owner
Well,
being
they
there?
had the fight at what is the Dallas Cowboys practice facility. It's called
Right.
the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco, Texas, right outside of Dallas. I've actually covered a few fights in that arena before. It's a
Callie
great
Fly
spot.
fight there against
Roman Gonzalez.
that's right. I was there as well. I was there. I've been
Yeah,
there.
the main event that night was, if I'm not mistaken, was Mikey Garcia against Jesse Vargas.
That's right. Yeah.
So I've covered a few fights there. I mean, I covered like Kovalev against, I believe it was Elidir Alvarez in their rematch, I guess it was, or maybe the first fight. Teofimo was on the undercard. Uh, Oscar Valdez. I've covered like Errol Spence there against Ocampo. Anyway, it's a great arena. It's in a great little spot right outside of Dallas. It's got some nice restaurants and hotels, and they built up that whole area in Frisco. So first class arena. And Bam is not from Dallas; he's from San Antonio. So it's a little bit of a hike, but it's still from his home state. And he's a guy. Not only is a tremendous top 10 pound for pound caliber fighter, but he's becoming a draw. You know what I mean? He's bringing fans in. When they fought in Phoenix, he did nice crowds. He's obviously done crowds in San Antonio. It seemed like they had I didn't hear an official attendance, but just seeing some of the pictures, looked like they had a nice crowd there in Frisco on Saturday. And what can you say? The guy is, he's the truth, I guess, is what the kids say. So I'm looking forward to again watching the fight in its entirety a little bit later today. I was going to say to you though, Andrew, the only thing that was unfortunate, and I actually had asked Bam about this in my interview that I had with him in the lead up to the fight. Mm-hmm. It was just unfortunate that if Bam Rodriguez, as a champion and such a top young fighter, was having a unification fight, he would have been the focus of the boxing fans and media all during the buildup. Mm-hmm. And he would have a lot of attention on his event and a lot of conversation and all that. But again, it's no offense to him, but he wasn't going to ever get to that level because you had the competition of the undisputed heavyweight championship fight between Fury and Usyk. Between Usyk and Dubois, rather. That's a huge fight. And on top of that, you had the return of the legendary Manny Pacquiao with a pretty stacked undercard. So, unfortunately, he got the short shrift. So, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm in Vegas covering Pacquiao against Barrios. But the way the timing worked is that I was sitting literally in the press room during some of the early undercard preliminary fights, was able to watch the entirety and I was there with a bunch of other people, all watching on our computers and our phones and things of the Usyk fight. That ended. And then I went to, I was in the media center. So I just went, across the way into the arena to watch the rest of the Pacquiao card, the preliminaries into the main event and the main pay-per-view card. But the Bam fight was on basically at the exact same time as the pay-per-view. So there was no shot. Then you get busy. I'm writing the Usyk fight. I'm writing the Pacquiao undercard. I'm writing the Pacquiao fight. I got to find a few hours of sleep. Then I got to get up and I got to get my ass to the airport. So I just didn't have time to really delve into what occurred. I just saw some quick highlights on the Bam fight, and that was it. Like I said, I'll watch it in full a little bit later.
Well, like you said, he's only 25 years old, but I'm pretty damn sure that we'll be talking about him a lot more in the coming years. As always, Dan, I appreciate you so much. I know you've got a busy little day ahead of you as well before you get that to watch the Bam fight. But as always, down below in the description, all of Dan's social media, his Substack, his newsletter, his podcast, his YouTube channel, everything is in links below this interview. Go and check him out. Go and subscribe and support Dan, because if you like what he says on here, I'm pretty sure he's a little bit more tasty on his own stuff. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you as always. Have a good day, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon.
All right, Andrew, enjoy the rest of your trip in Spain, and hope you get travel safely home.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate you, mate. See you soon.